Welcome Year 10s to Lesson 2, looking at the Weimar Republic. And our inquiry question today is, why did the new government have such a shaky start? Your booklet looks like this, so make sure you have it printed off or open for your digital copy. And before we move on, I want you just to have a look at this first page from the start, your booklet 1. And I've just highlighted what we've already done. So as we go through the lessons, we'll go back and we'll highlight what we've done so you can see we're working through it. So already we've done this whole section here. And today we're looking at this section here. So it's like a similar amount. A few things to note. Straight after the war, when they're trying to set up this new government, Berlin, the capital, was in total chaos. Ex-soldiers, nationalists had returned, and there was pitched battles with violent confrontations with the communists and the workers. Hundreds were killed. Because of this, the new government didn't form itself in Berlin. It actually began its life in a sleepy town called Weimar, hence Weimar Republic. Very quick overview of the kind of sequence of events that led to the Republic being created. This is all the stuff we've already looked at, so I'll be very quick. Kaiser abdicates. Ebert's appointed to run the country. There's these extreme violent uprisings in Berlin, which we look at next lesson, the Spartacists. Temporary government is set up to try and organise elections. There's this new parliament, it decides on a new constitution, which is what we're looking at today. Sets up in Weimar, then moves back to Berlin when it's all calmed down. And Ebert is officially elected as the first president. He wins the support of the army, industry and trade unions that we looked at the end of last lesson. A few things to note here. As you read through our booklet, we go through it together. So as you're reading through this booklet, if you want to, and it's only if you want to, highlight specific factual detail as we go, that would be great. It will help later when you write exams and a bit of revision. So it's a good thing to get into the habit of. Just make sure you don't highlight too much. It's all about highlighting very specific factual detail. So not key information, but factual detail. So dates, amounts, names, things like that. So just a little bit of background. Today, the first part of this lesson is looking at the Constitution and this Weimar Republic, the way it was run, and a few points to note. The Constitution had something known as the Bill of Rights, and it guaranteed German citizens freedom of speech, religion, equality. It gave the vote to both men and women, over 20 or 20 and over. It used proportional representation as a voting system. We'll look at that in a second. There was an elected president and an elected Reichstag. The president decided who the chancellor would be, and the chancellor is like our prime minister. But the Reichstag was the parliament, it made the law. So they were the people who actually made the law, not the president and not the chancellor. This is a little image that explains how the Constitution worked in practice. You have your own here. It's slightly different, but it's exactly the same. This one is just a bit more visual. So first thing to note is that German people voted directly for the president. So they elect the president. They also elect members of the Reichstag. So they're like members of parliament. The chancellor, the head of the government, should have a majority in the Reichstag. So they should basically come from the biggest party in the Reichstag, whoever that party is. Or as long as they got the what's known as the confidence of the Reichstag. So if the Reichstag wants this person as chancellor, they should be made chancellor. Interestingly though, the president actually appoints the chancellor. So it's the president who decides who the chancellor will be, not the Reichstag. But as we can see here, he's supposed to give it to whoever has a majority. This is important when we come to look at Hitler and how he gained power. So the Chancellor leads the Reichstag. The Reichstag represents the people, but one very important thing to note. There's something known in the Constitution as Article 48, and it's the Emergency Powers Act. It allows the President, when there's a state of emergency, to take control directly. So he can suspend the Chancellor and the Reichstag and kind of rule directly, the same way as a monarch or the Kaiser would have done originally. And there's some issues that arise from that. As I said, you've got your own copy here. Now, a little bit about proportional representation. What this means, it's a system of voting where a political party, so the Nazis or the Social Democrats or the Communists, receive the same number of representatives as the percentage of vote they get across the whole country. So if the Nazis win 30% of the vote, they get 30% of all the representatives in Parliament, in the Reichstag. So for example, if there was only 100 representatives, there was a lot more. But for ease of maths, if they got 30% of the vote, they would have 30 of these representatives. So you get a proportion equal to the percentage of votes you get. This is our first task number 1 for this lesson, and it's here in your booklet. So we're looking at this section up here. And it's another colour coding section. You need 2 colours. I've gone for green for strengths and red for weaknesses, though you can choose whichever colour you want. And your job is to read through these different sections that represent different parts of the Constitution and decide if they are a strength or a weakness. Just to highlight what I mean by a strength or a weakness. Now, a strength is something that you think that makes the Constitution a good thing. So why might you or people at the time think this is good? Or it might be something you think makes it likely to last and to be a success. So something that means this Constitution and this government and this republic is going to be a success and it's going to last a long time. A weakness is like the opposite of that. Something that you think makes the Constitution a bad thing. Or perhaps it makes it less likely to last and be a success. If you'd like to do this task totally by yourself, without any input from me, pause the video now. If you'd like me to give you a few ideas to start with, we'll move on to the next slide. But if you want to do it independently, from scratch, pause the video now, please. For the rest of us, we're going to move on, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've done. So I've done 2 for you. I've highlighted proportional representation as red, as a weakness. Note, however, there's 2 proportional representation ones, here and here. And I said this is a weakness because it prevents one party getting a majority, but it means there's lots of small parties making it difficult to pass laws, and this led to weak and often short-lived governments. So governments that didn't last very long. They kept falling apart. Because if you've got lots of tiny little parties all trying to work together, it's really difficult to get anything done, to get everyone to agree. And so governments would collapse and they'd have to keep having more votes and going back to the people to try and work out what to do. So that's not good. It's going to mean it's weak. It's not going to enable them to last and be a success. Positive thing, though, a strength, is it says here that central government, so the main government, had more power. So it had a lot of power, but it also meant that the 18 provinces, so the kind of states, kept their own local government as well. So there was a good thing there, that the local government had a lot of power to do what it needed to do, but it also meant that the local government also had their own power, and so they could deal with local issues. So that's a good thing. Now, if you want to have another go, pause this video again. I will go through them all in a second, but I really strongly suggest you give this a go yourself now. So pause the video, please, and complete the task. Great. Now let's have a little look at what I've done. So here's a few more done for you. Got a strength up here, Article 48. And again, note that there's 2 Article 48s. I said this is a good thing because it means that the President can act without Parliament's approval in an emergency. And when you've got a Parliament which is difficult to pass laws and is weak, if there's an emergency, how on earth is it going to sort that emergency out? So it's good to be able to have someone who can step in and sort it out for you. The negative is that communists and nationalists who hated democracy, they didn't like democracy at all or the new constitution, they wanted to get rid of it, but they were still allowed to gain seats in the Reichstag even though they hated it and they wanted to completely destroy it. So why would you do that? So that's a weakness. It's going to make it less likely to be a success. Also, the fact that they had relied on the army to crush rebellions, and we'll look at that later, shows that there was a big amount of people against this new republic and that the republic was quite weak because it needed the army to crush these rebellions. Now, a few more for you. Bill of Rights, it's a good thing. It guarantees freedoms, religion, equality. We would say that that's good. Proportional representation has got some good points to it. It meant that everyone had a fair chance at gaining some seats in the Reichstag. That has to be good. It's fair. Also here, the Chancellor decided which laws should be passed, but only after the Reichstag had approved it. So again, that's good because it's shown that the Reichstag has got a lot of power. It's going to make a success because it's not just being told what to do. I haven't highlighted this one because I'm going to force you to make your own decision for at least one. So I want this color coded in, but I'm not going to tell you if I think this is a weakness or a strength. So you have to complete at least one yourself. Right, so at this point, all of this should be highlighted and completed. And this should give you an idea about the strengths and weaknesses of this new constitution, because it was both good and bad. It had both strengths and weaknesses. We're going to go on straight on to task 2 now. And here it's another exam practice question, but it's a little bit different to the way we did it before. In this one, you've got this source here, just like last time. It's from a speech in the new Constitution Assembly. And you're trying to find details in the source that support these 3 inferences. So I've made 3 inferences already. So I've said an inference I've made is Germans felt uncomfortable with democracy, Germans did not trust each other or the new government, and different parties disagreed with each other. And here it is on yours. So you need to get 3 different colours, just like I've done here, 3 different colours, and highlight them all in the 3 different colours. Then reading this source here, you need to highlight the details that you think made me make these inferences. So what in here, let's go back to my slides, what in this source makes me think that Germans felt uncomfortable with democracy? So have a read through this and see if you can highlight these 3 different things. So complete task 2, pause the video. Again, if you want to do this totally by yourself, without any input from me, pause the video and fully complete it now. If you want to, I will go through the first one with you to kind of give you an idea about the kind of things I'm looking for, but then I'll let you do the next 2 yourself. So if you want to do it all completely by yourself, pause the video now. For the rest of us, we'll move on. Here's the first one for you. So Germans felt uncomfortable with democracy. The detail in the source that I've highlighted is this. Germans cannot shake off their old political timidity. So being timid, being shy, not knowing what to do. I've said they feel uncomfortable with democracy because it shows here that they didn't quite feel they knew what to do. They'd never had democracy before. They'd always had a Kaiser, someone to tell them what to do, and they weren't really sure what to do with this new democracy. They felt uncomfortable with it. So we got the inference, and we got the detail to support it. You now need to do these other two. So I'd like you to pause the video now, please. Great. And here are they done for you. So Germans didn't trust each other. One finds suspicion everywhere. And disagreements, listening to debates with real concern. So listening to all these debates, he didn't like what he was hearing. He disagreed with what he was hearing. So he listened to the debates with real concern. Remember, in the real exam, you'll only need to find two inferences. So this has made it a little bit more difficult. So now you should have this colour-coded in. So why did Germans hate the Treaty of Versailles? And indeed, what was the Treaty of Versailles? It's a cartoon here, which kind of give you a little bit of an insight into what the treaty was and why the Germans might have hated it so much. First thing to note, Treaty of Versailles was the main peace treaty signed at the end of the First World War. It was not the armistice. So the armistice was like a ceasefire agreement. The peace treaty was what was signed later on that dealt with all the issues. Signed in a place called Versailles in June in France. Main people that you can see in this image are the leaders of Britain, USA and France. Here they are. And also you have the Germans there and the Treaty of Versailles. So the Germans here bent over signing the Treaty of Versailles. So you can see they're kind of sitting with all the others like looking at them expectantly. A few things to note. The French, the British and the Americans wanted different things. The French, they wanted revenge. They wanted to punish the Germans for what they'd done. Most of the fighting was done on French soil. They had suffered horrific damages, lost homes, lost soldiers. They also wanted a weakened France because they didn't want France to be able to invade them again in the future. The Americans wanted a safe world, peaceful world, a fairer world. They wanted disarmament, which means getting rid of all your weapons. He also promised something known as self-determination for the peoples of Eastern Europe. So he said every country should be able to govern itself independently in the way it wants to. Britain, they said they wanted to make Germany pay. The leader did, because the British people wanted to hear that. They had suffered during the war and they wanted Germany to pay too. However, he actually wanted justice. He wanted not revenge, because he worried a peace that was too harsh on Germany could lead to another war in a few years' time. He also wanted to be able to trade with Germany, because he wanted British Empire to grow again. And that was going to be through trade, through commerce, through economics. So here's a very interesting picture for you, photograph. Some of you might recognise some words on that bottom bit. This bit here, possibly. And what it is this. It's a photograph showing German people protesting against the Treaty of Versailles out the front of the Reichstag. So this building here is the German Parliament. German people saw the Treaty of Versailles as a diktat, which basically means an enforced peace. They always felt they'd been treated unfairly, and the terms can be remembered as a lamb to the slaughter. So here you have your next task, and it's like this. And the reason I say lambs to the slaughter is because you can see here, L-A-M-B, lambs. These are the different sections of the Treaty of Versailles, the different terms. They deal with land, army, money, and blame. So land and colonies, military, something known as reparations, and the war guilt. Your job, the task, is to simply draw an image to help you remember each of these key terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and if you can, why the Germans hated it so much. So it's quite an interesting little task. So in these sections here, have a read through. Again, as I said at the start, if you want to highlight factual detail, so numbers, dates, percentages, it's good to do that as well. So they lost huge amounts of their land, their overseas property, their colonies. They lost their iron and coal reserves, so where they got their coal and iron from. Their army, their military was limited massively. Remember, they'd started with a huge army and navy, and they were reduced to virtually nothing. They were said they had to pay for the war a huge amount of money, £6.6 billion, to compensate the victors. So to compensate France, Britain, America. Germany was financially ruined. How was it ever going to pay this? Finally, and most hated of all, was this blame clause, the war guilt, known as Article 231. It said that Germany had to accept the blame for the outbreak of the war totally. So the war was their fault and their fault alone. However, Germans felt they did not start the war. It was Austria, Serbia, Russia. Remember the assassination of the Archduke? It wasn't them. They were simply defending themselves. So why should they have to take the entire blame for the war? They hated this. So, again, pause this video now and complete this task. Good. I'm going to move on just to give you a little extra bit of information about something known as the November criminals. It's really important to understand this idea, this concept. Treaty of Versailles damaged Germany's economy. It imposed heavy reparations, so that was the money, and it really destroyed the economy. It also impacted politically, because the Germans resented the leaders of the new republic, so the new leaders of their new democracy, they became known as the November criminals. This is because they had surrendered in November 1918 when they signed the armistice. So right from the beginning, the German people connected this defeat, connected the humiliation and weakness, not only of the Treaty of Versailles, but also of the armistice and the surrendering with the new government. And they became known as the November criminals, and it stuck. And you've got that written down here. Next, we're going to do a little bit of source analysis. What questions do you have about this? I have mentioned it before. Think about the different parts of this image. Who are the two people represented? Who's this? Who's this? This guy's carrying a flag. What kind of flag is that? Why is this person dressed in red with a little mask on? And don't think of Mask as a superhero like you would now. Does he look like a nice person? Stabbing him, look. Stabbing him in his back. That's going to be hard for you to fully understand this source without more contextual knowledge. That's what we're going to do now. So what was this stab in the back theory? Your task 3 is going to be to highlight some historical sources and interpretations. It's going to help you analyse the image and understand what the stab in the back theory is. Your task is to highlight the key details in the sources to help you. And in your book it looks like this. So there's these two sources here. So you just need a single highlighter colour for this. This is from a documentary series, and it's an interview with a German soldier who was on the front at the time. And the second one is a historian's writing and their interpretation. So it's a historical interpretation. Your job is to read through and highlight some key information that's going to help you understand this image and understand what this stab in the back actually was. Now, I've done a little bit for you to get you going. And a few things that interest me if I'm thinking about what's this image mean and what's important about it is this. Of course we were angry. Frontline troops didn't feel defeated. So they didn't feel defeated. That's important. They're angry. It's important. So read through the historical interpretations and sources and evidence and highlight what's going to help you analyse the image and understand the stab in the back theory. So pause the video now, please. Great. Now here's a completed one for you. I don't think you need more than this highlighted. This is more than enough. You need to be quite strict about what you highlight. Let's just see what he says. He says he's hungry, didn't feel defeated. He says everywhere we were still on enemy territory, so the German troops were still basically in French territory, so why were they losing? Here's the important bit. A myth grew amongst the German soldiers. They'd been stabbed in the back. Frontline troops were betrayed by Marxists and Jews. Surviving troops took their bitterness away. So we can see here, they didn't think they had been defeated. They felt they'd been stabbed in the back and betrayed. So being stabbed in the back is connected to being betrayed, and they blamed particular people, the Marxists and the Jews. Marxists are another name for communists. So it's very left-leaning communists, and we'll come to that later. And they were bitter, very bitter. If you haven't done the second source, have a go now. But I will give you a little bit of a heads up on the next slide, but give it a go. Great, and here's the next one done for you. Things I've highlighted. Army leaders like Ludendorff encouraged this view, the view they'd never lost the war. And this is important. If only weak politicians and communist revolutionaries had not demanded peace. So they're blaming the politicians, and again the communists, which is the same as the Marxists. They had demanded peace, not the army. The army were happy to fight on. The army had been stabbed in the back by these weak politicians because they demanded peace. They'd stabbed the army in the back. Nationalists were happy to blame the new democratic government for making the peace. So remember, making peace was the armistice. So they blamed them. The army could have fought on. It was the communists and the weak politicians that had given in and surrendered and stabbed the army in the back. So if you haven't completed the highlighting, just go back on this video and highlight as I've done. So now these two sources should be highlighted with the key bits of information, and you should have a better understanding about what this actually means. Now, task 4 is really just to bring it all together, and there's 4 questions to answer, based simply on the 2 sources you've just already highlighted. So this should be quick and easy. Who did the soldiers think they'd been betrayed by? What did the surviving troops take with them to the newly democratic government? Who encouraged the view that Germany never really lost the war? And who were happy to blame the democratic government for making peace? So those 4 questions, I'm not going to give you the answers. You should really be able to work this out. So pause the video now, please. Great. Now, just because I'm nice, let's go through those answers. So who did they blame? Who do they think they'd been betrayed by? Marxists and the Jews. So they've been betrayed by the Marxists and the Jews. What did the surviving troops take back with them? They took their bitterness with them. Who encouraged the view that Germany had never really lost war? Well, army leaders like Ludendorff did. We'll look at him again later. And who were happy to blame the democratic government for making peace? The nationalists were, and the nationalists included the Nazis, but others as well. So you should now have a better understanding of what that initial image means and what the stab in the back theory was. There's the image again. So you should now know that this person represents the communists, the Jews, and the weak politicians. This person represents the brave German soldier fighting on. The stab in the back refers to the making peace, the armistice, and these people forcing peace even though the German army were happy to fight on. One thing to consider and remember as well is that the nationalists were still referring to this event 6 years later. So this is an election campaign by the nationalists, and even they were still talking about how the November criminals had stabbed them in the back. So it just shows how important this hatred of the treaty and the November criminals was, because 6 years later, and it's still a key way to try and get votes against the government. So a quick overview before we do our final exam question. Why did the Republic have a shaky start? Germans had lost the war, its economy was ruined. There was chaos on the streets. The Republic and the Social Democrats were known as November criminals. The Constitution had its weaknesses. Proportional representation meant extreme parties could gain seats. The Treaty of Versailles was seen as a diktat and enforced peace, and people hated it, and they blamed the government for signing it. And they also blamed the government for this stab in the back theory, and they blamed the government, the communists, and the Jews. So lots of reasons it had such a shaky start. Our final task today is an exam practice question. Explain why there was opposition in Germany to the Treaty of Versailles. It's a 12 marker. It's really asking you, why did Germans hate the Treaty of Versailles? Why did they hate it? Giving you 2 bullet points, 2 ideas. Article 231, the blame clause, and reparations, which is to do with how much money they owed. There's again exam advice in yellow. You need 3 paragraphs directly linked to the question. You must show how a number of things led to that event or change. So it led to the opposition. You don't need an introduction. You don't need a conclusion. Complete this as a Word doc and use the file drop box, which is on the frog page, to upload it and share it with your teachers. Here's the mark scheme. Have a look what you're aiming for. See AO1 and AO2. AO2 is explanation and analysis. AO1 is like the depth of knowledge you have. That's your specific factual detail. And to get you going, I've done a paragraph for you. So this is paragraph 1, all about Article 231. It gives you a model to aim for. So of course you can use this. So I've done 1 for you, so you need to do another 2. One reason there was opposition to the Treaty of Versailles in Germany was Article 231. So I've answered the question. Article 231 stated that Germany had to accept full responsibility for causing the war. So I've explained what it is. Now I need to link to the question. German people felt they were unfairly blamed for the devastation of the First World War. It was felt in Germany that the role of other nations in the development of the war was ignored in favour of placing total blame on Germany. Indeed, they saw the treaty as a diktat, an enforced peace, so you've got some specific factual detail there, in which they were not even allowed to be part of the peace negotiations. This led, so connective, this led to the people of Germany opposing the signing of the treaty by the Weimar government. So that's my AO2. I'm explaining, I'm analysing. This blame clause was also important because it can be linked to other reasons for Germans opposing the treaty. So I'm now linking to my next paragraph. For example, it provided the justification for the heavy punishment handed down to Germany, such as reparations, and that's where you need to think of your third reason. So there's a kind of a model paragraph for you. You can pause this video, take it down, use it. Gives you an idea about what you need to recreate for your other two paragraphs. So pause the video now and have a go. Okay, just a little heads up about what we'll do next lesson. We'll be looking at this woman. So she's this woman here, and also her other comrade, Karl Liebknecht. And they were murdered revolutionaries who took part and led the Spartacist failed uprising in Berlin. So we'll be learning all about the Spartacists, the Freikorps, and the Kapp Putsch. Hopefully this lesson has been helpful. The tasks have been accessible but challenging. Make sure you have a go at that 12 marker. But as always, keep well, work hard, and enjoy.